Hi, friends, and thanks for listening to The Fashionista Life, brought to you by True Fashionistas, where you can sell, shop, and look fabulous. I am your host, Jennifer Johnson, and today we welcome into the studio April O'Leary, and she is the founder of O'Leary Publishing and the author of, oh my gosh, 6 books. She is committed to creating books that exceed the industry standards for her aspiring authors. She's a board member of the Florida Authors and Publishers Association and on the membership benefits committee with the Independent Book Publishers Association. She's also the host of the I'm Booked podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Jennifer.
Absolutely. I had no idea that you've published 6 books.
I have.
Wow. Like what genre? What are they about?
All of my books are inspirational, self-help, and really meant to be from my heart, from my life experience to help other people.
Wow. That's the best way, right? You can lead by example, lead from the mistakes that we've all made, right? That's wonderful. Well, we're talking about publishing today. And we were just chatting before we got on about, when should I do a book and all of those things. And I shared with you, I have an idea for a book someday in my future, right? How do I know that I should publish a book?
It's a great question. A lot of people have book ideas, or they have others who say, you have an interesting story, or you should write a book. And I have authors come to me, prospective authors, asking the same question, should they write a book? And the thing I always say is, well, if the book was in your hand right now, what are you doing with it? Is it for a family legacy?
Mhm.
Is it a book that's going to help your brand grow? Is it a passion project, like you've learned something and you really feel that others could benefit from your experience? And then you make a decision, is it worth the time? Is it worth the effort? Is it worth the money
Mhm.
to invest in that kind of a endeavor?
Sure. And kind of along with that, you had mentioned, will it help your brand kind of thing? And a great tool to up your brand or to gain awareness to your brand is by doing a book. I mean, I was just reading a book, and you may know this person, Mike Reed, and it's The Key Person of Influence. And in that book, they talk about writing a book because that also it increases your credibility within your industry and really within your community because it's everyone's going, oh my gosh, you wrote a book, you're an author, but you can add that to everything that you do, right? What is your take on that?
That's absolutely true. I'll tell you, back in 2011, I had a life coaching brand. And I took all of my courses with this guy, David Essel, who's based in Fort Myers. And he asked me at the time, would I be the guest producer for, at the time, he had an XM radio show. And I didn't know anything about that. And his one requirement for his all positive talk radio show was the guest had to have a book.
Oh.
And he didn't care if it was a spiritual or a professional athlete or a self-help person, but they had to have a book. And the light bulb went on in my head that, oh, a book is a door opener.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought to myself, well, if that's the case, I should probably write a book. And so I did. And I launched my first book in 2012. From that book, I built an 8-week course, which I taught locally and online. And from that, I spurred on a few conferences. So
I remember I attended one.
You did. And so the book was more than just how many copies did you sell? The book was, now I got to open these doors that magically somehow people think you're more credible.
They do. You have author behind your name.
And it was really quite an interesting process because the things I was learning and teaching with my clients behind doors and private sessions were similar client to client to client. And now I got to share the message of my story that helped all of them and helped attract others to me who wanted those same solutions. So it became really a tool to attract the right types of clients as well.
Wow. And you used it as a tool to grow your brand.
Absolutely.
Which, and this is another point that I was thinking about was, we're on the heels of probably, let's face it, probably a recession, right? And maybe by the time this airs, maybe that's where we'll be at, right? You could use it as an extra stream of income because did you publish it by yourself, your book that you originally did? Or I know you own a publishing company now, but back then, what did you do?
So back then, I had magical thinking. I didn't know what I didn't know.
Of course.
So I wrote my book in 7 days. Actually, my
Oh,
kids
my
went
word.
with my in-laws to North Carolina, and I had this book. It was like being pregnant with an idea, and you're like, I have to birth this book.
Right.
So I sat down, I mapped it out, I wrote it, and I had this manuscript, fledgling little thing that I thought, I'm going to find the right publisher. So I pulled some books off of my shelf that I thought were similar in nature to mine. And I looked at the back cover and inside, and I said, who are these publishers? So I kind of came to conclude like maybe 3 that were potentially good candidates to publish my next to best-selling book. What I thought, I was a totally unknown person, and I had no idea what the publishing industry had to offer.
But I love that, because I am so much like that as well. I'm happy to know I'm not, out there, because I have the same thoughts like, oh my gosh, I'm going to take on the world.
Yeah. So I signed up, as luck would have it, for one of these publishers' writers workshop conference that they had up in Tampa. So I drove up for the day. I brought my manuscript in my briefcase. I thought, I'm going to hand this off to the CEO. They're going to be like, where have you been all my life? And the rest was going to be history. And this 8-hour workshop, what I learned was that in order to attract a traditional publisher, you need to have a platform. Meaning, how many email subscribers do you have? How many Twitter followers? How many Facebook? Who knows about you? Because the onus to market your book is always on the shoulder of the author.
Sure.
And so if they're going to invest money in you in the way of an advance or paying for your book publishing project, you have to be able to guarantee sort of in a way that you can sell the book on the back end.
Of course.
And then they will earn the lion's share of the royalties on the back end. So I left that workshop thinking, well, if I have to build my own platform, which is a lot of work, I may as well benefit from that and learn how to publish myself. And so I didn't know that there were independent publishing houses or hybrid publishing companies at the time. I don't know if there were as many at that time, because this was 10 years ago.
Of course, I probably were not, because now it's becoming
like
more.
Part of the industry groups that are available, like you mentioned in my bio, the IBPA, Independent Book Publishers Association. That's a national organization. They have a national awards contest. They do their own events and conferences, and they offer support for independent publishers. So it's really this avenue for people who don't have the platform yet to get a traditional publishing experience without having to sort of hammer around in the dark and figure it out like I had to do in 2012. Exactly.
So you ended up publishing it on your own.
I did. And I don't want to say I wasted a lot of time and money, but I taught myself something that now is a valuable skill. And so I think that when people approach me today about book publishing, I'm able to share in a very fair and even keeled manner about the options, because you can do it yourself. There's tons of YouTube videos. There's tons of books about how to publish. There's lots of how to DIY, but do you want to invest the time to teach yourself? Do you want to invest the money? You're still going to have to hire independent designers and editors and all of that stuff. Or would you rather just work with a company who basically has figured all that out and they'll help you? So it's really a matter of what kind of path you want. And for some who already have that platform built, they may want to seek out a literary agent and try to get that gold standard traditional publishing deal.
But I love the fact that you went into this conference and you walked out going, you weren't defeated. You went on to publish your own book. So you not only created a book, you created a company out of that as well. You're like, there's room for this. You found a need and you filled it.
I did. And I felt as though I learned, I wasn't in the dark anymore about how the publishing industry works. I went to that conference not having any idea about what that looked like. And I left going, oh, so I don't have to waste 5 years trying to send in some sort of unsolicited manuscript to traditional publishers and getting rejections, not knowing why.
And wasting that time.
Right. I was able to say, okay, if this is the facts and I don't qualify for this, then what are the other options? And I think as an entrepreneur, and you can relate to this as well, it's about figuring out what will work and taking off the table the things that aren't going to work.
Right. Marie Forello, I don't know if you follow her, but she has a book that says everything is figure outable.
Yes.
I read it and it's so true.
Yes.
Everything is figure outable. I mean, how did you, and I know you just said all of a sudden you just realized I have to write this book. What was it that made you realize I have to do this book?
It really was my experience with the guest producing of the radio show, because I have this big vision for what I
Mhm.
want to accomplish. And I knew that writing a book would be a way to differentiate myself
Mhm.
as a life coach. I mean, the catchphrase life coach is so, I don't want to say blasé, but they're so prolific.
Mhm.
It's like the term yoga instructor. Well, there's no real degree to become a yoga instructor. There's no school you go to. You could
Right.
go to different studios and get their teacher certification, but there's no like legal regulation of
Right.
that,
It's
nor
you
is there
put the shingle on your door and you say, I'm a
I'm a
whatever.
whatever. And
Right.
so as a life coach, I thought, well, what is my differentiating factor? How are
Mhm.
people going to know what I'm about?
Right.
And so that became a way for me to say, this is what my experience is, and this is what I can help people with.
That's awesome. That's great. So if I'm somebody that's sitting here and thinking about writing a book, and I know we can go to break and talk about when we come back, but to kind of be thinking about, I want to publish a book. What now? So we're going to head to a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to answer that question. With the kids heading back from school, you may have a little extra time on your hands to clean your closet and maybe even theirs. Hey, maybe even have time to redecorate your house. And if you're wondering what to do with all that stuff that you've accumulated, you can bring it all to True Fashionistas, where they sell all of your unwanted items for you. They take away all the hassle by doing all the work, and all you have to do is collect your money. You can reach out to them online at truefashionistas.com. Come into the store or check them out on Facebook or Instagram. And again, that's truefashionistas.com. All right, we're back with April O'Leary of O'Leary Publishing, and we're talking about publishing books. Okay, so what do I have to do before I really even think about publishing a book? Are there steps that I need to take?
It's a great question, because a lot of aspiring authors feel as though they need to just sit in front of the blank computer screen and just start writing. My best advice is map your book out first. Figure out, if you were going to think in outline format, what is it I want to say? What's the problem the reader has? And how am I solving that problem for them?
Mhm.
What are the steps? What are the examples I could share, not just from my own life, but maybe examples of third-party clients you've worked with or famous people?
Mhm.
And then, okay, here's my outline. Here's the 10 chapters that I plan to write. Here's the bullet point examples and highlight points I want to make, maybe even quotes you want to include. And then you chip away one by one. And it's something that we do at O'Leary Publishing. We actually have a service called book mapping,
Okay.
where people can work with myself and my head editor, Heather
Mhm.
DeRocher. And then within 2 hours, we listen to all the ideas. And by the end of that session, they have their whole book mapped out. They have sample titles and subtitles and the back cover copy written.
Oh my gosh.
Because at the end of the day, you don't want to waste your time writing a bunch of stuff that's going to get thrown out.
Right.
And we've had also aspiring authors who've come to us with their manuscript, I'm saying that in quotes,
Mhm.
and they say, it's done, I'm ready to be published. And we look at it and we say, that's an awesome first draft.
And they're like, what? I spent X amount of time. First, did you just say that right?
Yeah. So, a lot of times, because this is a new experience and writing a large piece of work that might be 30,000 words,
Mhm.
even in school, we don't write
Yeah.
that kind of a length. And so most of the time, the biggest issue is authors write too much about themselves.
Mhm.
And so it reads like a journal entry. And if I don't really know you, if you're a debut author, why do I really care?
Exactly.
Because I'm really reading the book to solve my own problem. And so that's where we kind of help them turn the tables a little bit and say, how about a little bit less of you and a little bit more towards the reader?
What's in it for me?
Yes.
Mhm.
We FM, right?
Yes, exactly. Because I'm going to stop reading.
Yeah.
If you're not some famous person that I'm like dying to know, like Matthew McConaughey,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I loved his book,
Mm-hmm.
but I loved his book because we've seen him on screen and you want to know who's behind that.
Right.
but Jennifer Johnson, like, I don't know you. You're
Right.
you're not famous. I
Well,
mean,
and the
you
same
know?
is true for me when I wrote my first book, and even most one of my most recent books. It was more about the lessons that I had
Mhm.
learned, and some of them were personal examples, but they were generalized to apply to a wider audience
Right.
because the details and what's specific about my story is only specific to me.
Mhm.
But the lessons, if you extricate them up to the 50,000-foot level, they apply in general to most people. You as
Right.
a entrepreneur who
Mhm.
started a retail brand, you could speak to a lot of people who want to start a retail brand, even outside of running a
Right.
consignment shop,
Right.
because the lessons are going to be the
Of
same.
course. And life lessons, and, when you're going through it, you don't really realize what is being taught. When
Hmm.
something bad happens or something challenging happens, you don't see it at the moment. And then you can look back at it and go, "Oh my gosh, that was a huge lesson. Oh, I'm gonna write about that." You accumulate things, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times, the authors we work with as well, it's about their passion and their brand and what they're doing, and another way to market themselves.
Mhm.
And so I have a call later today with a prospective author who has grown a brand locally that's expanding, and they're in an industry that's really growing.
Mhm.
And I saw a recent Facebook post, and I just messaged this person out of the blue and said, have you thought about writing a book? Because what you're doing is very cutting edge.
Mhm.
And I don't know if others in your industry have spoken out, statistically speaking, on the effectiveness of
Sure.
what you're doing in your industry. And he was like, that's a great idea.
Mhm.
So one way to give yourself that additional credibility and exposure is through a book.
So that's kind of how, if I were sitting down thinking, "Okay, I know I have in my head I wanna write a book." Is that how you figure out what you're gonna write about? Is what's your passion, what fuels you, that kinda thing? Or is there another way?
Yeah. Most of it comes down to, what do I want out of the book? Am I a business person and I want more exposure? I want more opportunities.
Your end game.
A lot of people want to start to be professional speakers.
Mhm.
And so a lot of professional speakers, the book is really a big deal because that's an additional income stream. If you want to be booked for conferences or
Mhm.
whatever, then they can order your book in bulk and distribute
Of
it to all the
course.
people you're speaking to. And then that just is a win-win for everybody.
Mhm.
We have authors who have done more like memoirs. They've already finished their careers and they're not looking to really grow a brand or go on some sort of
Mhm.
speaker circuit, but they want the intellectual challenge. They want the back and forth with the
Sure.
editorial team. They want some of the opportunities the book offers, but they really enjoy the process.
Uh-huh. I get it. So I should really kinda know what I wanna write a book on, or meaning our audience should really have some sort of idea. Or can you also sit down with them and help them figure out what it is?
I would say most authors have a sense of what they want to write about, but the idea can change midstream. And we've seen that happen a number of times too,
Oh.
where you start writing and then you're like, this isn't it.
Oh,
And then
because you
like
just know it? You
yeah,
just
you're paddling down the stream one way and you're like, wait a second, this isn't, I had to get all this out, but this isn't actually the book
Mhm.
idea. That's the book idea. And so we've had a number of authors that have done that as well. And as with any artistic endeavor, because writing is certainly artistic, just as
Right.
is any um, painting or pottery or
Mhm.
even designing a business, you have to be flexible. It's not a rigid process. Like, I'd like to say writing a book is like, first you do A, then you do B, then you
Mhm.
do C, but it never ends up that way. It's very organic. And if
Right.
you're in touch with your intuition and you are responsive to what your editorial feedback is, you'll find your way.
Got it. So let's say okay, wanna write a book. Do you have people who do ghostwriting? Or do most people write their own book?
Most people want to write their own book. And I would say that if you have the inclination, if you have the time and the writing skills, my experience in writing a book is that when I can get in the flow, it's almost like I source things that I couldn't have outsourced to a ghostwriter.
Mhm.
There are people who are time constrained and they would rather just outsource that to a
Sure.
ghostwriter. And so one of the ways in which we can do that is voice recordings and Zoom
Mhm.
recordings. So once we have agreed on a book map, and that's part of the process, we have to agree on what are we doing and where are we
Right.
going. And then it's just, I need a 30-minute recording on this particular topic. we get it transcribed, and then the editor will
Awesome.
pull it and write it into a readable format and have details filled in
Mhm.
that they might have forgotten. But it's a way to really work on a limited time frame with somebody who wants a book, but they're not going to sit down and
Right.
write it.
I find it interesting when you sit down and do some of this, how it brings you down sort of a rabbit hole. Where you're like, "Oh, I kind of forgot about that memory." Oh, it's a walk down memory lane. I would imagine, because even with writing my blog, I do that and I'm like, "Oh, I forgot all about that."
Yeah.
So it's a great exercise for you personally too, I would
And
have to imagine.
for most of our authors, I would say that the completion of the project is a reward in and itself,
Mhm.
because how many people can say I wrote a book?
Right.
Not many.
Mhm.
And so even the process of going through the inner work to get a book out into the world, that in and of itself is a reward in the process. And then as you start to use it to market your business or share with friends and family or go on a speaking tour, do
Mhm.
whatever other things you want to do with it, you already feel that sense of accomplishment because you got it done.
Right. Awesome. Is there any parting words that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
I would say have courage. Most of the time, the reason we don't want to put our words onto paper is we feel like we're
Sure.
unqualified. We don't have enough experience yet. People won't like what we have to say. And really, nobody has that feeling that they've put their flag at the top of the mountain. They've achieved everything
Mhm.
they need to achieve before they put their words on paper. Most of us are in the process of living life,
Right.
unless we're not. And then,
Right.
then the book opportunity's over. So just have courage and say, if I feel like I have something to say, if I've weathered some really
Mhm.
tough life hardships, or I've grown an awesome business and there are people that I could help, then do it.
Mhm. So get over the imposter syndrome.
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. Thank you again, April, for coming into the studio, and we sure appreciate it. And thanks again, friends, for tuning into the Fashionista Life. I'm Jennifer Johnson, and this has been brought to you by True Fashionistas, where you can sell, shop, and look fabulous and make your day fabulous.